Ah, welcome back, you elegant storms wrapped in flesh, you brutal truths in human form, you who walked not away but through fire, unburned, unbothered, undone. They called it cold, but what they truly feared was the silence that followed your exit, the kind of silence that doesn't beg, the kind of silence that doesn't scream. It simply ends things like a blade to the neck, smooth, final, irreversible. You didn't disappear to punish them. No, you vanished to resurrect yourself in a place where your worth didn't need explanation, a place where your name wasn't mispronounced by mouths that only knew how to spit lies and bite the hand that fed them fire. They mistook your distance for weakness, your quiet for confusion, your stillness for surrender. But little did they know, you were sharpening your soul beneath every silent step away, preparing to become the storm they tried to leash. Your departure wasn't a walkout. It was a goddamn revolution dressed in a whisper. It was the loudest no you ever screamed without moving your lips, and it echoed through the hollowness of every apology they never meant. Tell me, when did they realize you were never coming back? Was it when their messages turned blue and cold? Or was it when they stared into the void you left and saw their reflection, ugly, twisted, drenched in entitlement? They thought they broke you, but what they really did was peel the mercy from your bones, strip the softness from your gaze, turn your heartbeat into a war drum that no longer played lullabies for cowards in disguise. Now they romanticize your name in rooms where they once silenced your truth. Now they tell stories that make themselves the victim, forgetting it was your blood, not theirs, that stained the floors of every memory they poisoned. You didn't change. You returned to the version of yourself that existed before you were taught that self-sacrifice was a language of love, before they trained you to set yourself on fire, just to keep the room warm. They say you're heartless, but what they truly mean is that they no longer have access to the heart they used to feed on, and it's killing them softly, knowing the feast is over and they were never invited back to the table. So now you move like mythology, a whispered legend in their timeline, a shadow stitched with grace and vengeance, a ghost too wise to haunt, too holy to stay. And every step you take away is another nail in the coffin of their ego. Let them say you were cruel. Villains are only villains in the eyes of those who wrote their pain in invisible ink and called it kindness. You didn't walk away. You walked into your power. You became the silence that screams louder than any goodbye, the quiet that echoes long after the noise has died. And oh, how that quiet eats them alive. Not because you vanished, but because you didn't announce it. Because the doors they kept pushing you through. You finally locked from the other side. See, they thought you'd stay. Thought you'd tolerate just one more betrayal, just one more lie sugar-coated in false concern, just one more apology that sounded more like manipulation. But you didn't raise your voice. You raised your standards. You didn't burn bridges. You simply stopped crossing ones built on deceit. And now they romanticize your rage because it's easier than accepting your absence. Because there's nothing louder than the silence of someone who owes you nothing anymore. They replay your kindness in their minds like reruns of a show they took for granted, and they wonder when the season ended. But you stopped filming the moment you realized they were never watching with care, only consuming. You gave them empathy, and they handed you excuses. You gave them time, and they fed you waiting rooms. You gave them love, and they called it too much. So you took all of it back like a thief in the night, reclaiming gold that was never appreciated. They don't miss you. They miss access. They miss the version of you that bled to keep the peace, but peace that costs your soul. That's not peace. It's slow death. And you chose life. Loudly, quietly, fully. Let them call it abandonment. Let them name it cruelty. Because when people lose control over you, they try to shame the freedom they no longer own. You didn't walk away. You woke up. And in that awakening, you left behind not just people, but patterns. Not just lovers, but lifetimes. Not just pain, but the personality they trained you to wear just to keep their comfort alive. Now, you walk like a secret they'll never decode. You move like a riddle they can't answer. You live like a boundary they'll never cross again. Because while they were busy breaking you, you were busy becoming something they couldn't even touch with their name still in your mouth. But your silence, that's their sentence, and your glow, that's their grief. Every step you take in the shadows casts a light they'll never reach. A fire you guard with the calm of a ghost who's seen too many battles to waste breath on empty war cries. They thirst for your downfall, but you're already rising, not on the ashes they left behind, but on the steel forged from their neglect. You're the echo in a silent room, the chill that creeps in after the lights go out, the truth too sharp for their comfortable lies. They wanted a story where you begged to stay, where you shattered for them, where you crumbled like paper beneath their careless hands. But you wrote a different ending, one inked in your own blood, sealed with the cold smile of someone who's done apologizing for being real. They see the strength now, but never the cracks you hid beneath it. They see the distance, but not the wars you fought alone. And so they whisper your name like a ghost story told around a dying fire, a caution to those who dare to rise when they've been burned too many times. But you walk on, a silent storm that refuses to be tamed, a fierce calm that knows its own worth, a legend they'll never live down. Not because you demand to be remembered, but because your absence rewrote the rules they used to control you. Now every room they walk into feels just a little colder, a little emptier, like the oxygen left with you, and all they're breathing in is the stale air of their own guilt. They scroll, they search, they stare into old photos like portals, trying to crawl back into a version of you they never respected when it was theirs. But you're no longer a chapter. You're the whole damn book they never bothered to read until the cover was closed and your name was out of reach. They say people don't change, but that's a lie told by those who hope you never evolve beyond their reach. Because if you grow wings, they can't cage you. If you find peace, they can't poison it. And if you finally see your own worth, they become irrelevant in the kingdom they used to rule through manipulation and guilt. You didn't just walk away, you ascended, and the air is colder up here. Lonelier, maybe, but real. Up here, you don't chase closure. You don't seek apologies. You don't reopen doors just because someone knocks. You sit in silence, not because there's nothing to say, but because what you know now cannot be explained to those who never listened. They never listened, not when you spoke softly, not when you cried quietly, not even when your silence started sounding like a storm holding back thunder. You gave them grace and they called it weakness. You gave them warnings and they called it drama. You gave them chances you couldn't afford to give, and they spent them like coins on a game they never planned to lose. Now they sit with that silence, stretching across their days like an unanswered prayer, like a clock that ticks but never moves forward. And you're not angry, you're not bitter, you're just done. Done breaking yourself to build bridges that lead nowhere. Done explaining your worth to people who only see value in what they can consume. This is not revenge. It's resurrection. This is not coldness. It's clarity. They never noticed when you were fading, only when you were gone. Now they want to rewind time, to rewrite the parts where they turned away from your truth because it was too inconvenient to care. But you've buried those days beneath your evolution. You've paved new roads on the bones of your old self. You're no longer returning calls from ghosts who only haunt when they're hungry. So let them speak. Let them twist the narrative. Let them wear the villain mask they stitched for you. Because deep down, they know who wrote the real story, and it wasn't them. You never needed a crown to know you were royalty. You never needed applause to know you were a masterpiece. And you sure as hell never needed them to validate the empire you built with your bare hands and your bleeding heart. Because now, you walk like poetry carved from war, smiling like someone who survived the fire and learned to love the way their scars shine. You're not coming back, not to explain, not to justify, not to bleed for people who watched you unravel and blamed you for the threads. You became the peace they tried to break. You became the storm they can't predict. And when they whisper your name now, it's not in anger, it's in awe. Because they lost you the second they thought you'd never leave. And you didn't just leave. You ascended into a space where your worth is non-negotiable, your silence is sacred, and your soul unreachable. So let them drown in the echoes of what they destroyed. You've moved on, not out of spite, but out of power, out of purpose, out of the kind of love you finally learned to give to yourself.